So firstly, we wanted to say thank you for joining us. Appreciate it's the back end of day 2 here, and a lot of you will be dated out somewhat. So please bear with us for the next 30 minutes because we've got a really interesting session that you're going to take away a lot of key value points from as well. So thank you very much for joining us. My name is Karl Morgan, and I'm a Senior Account Executive at Ketch.
Hi, and I'm Stefan Dobrowolski, and I am a Solution Engineer.
Thank you, Stefan. So put simply, Ketch is a technology platform. Okay, we help brands make sure that they control their consumer data properly. Okay. The reason we exist today is that our founders were responsible for solving GDPR for Salesforce, and in doing so, they unearthed the fundamental gap between how brands approach privacy and how consumer privacy should be treated. Okay, our mission is to give businesses the power to be responsible stewards of data. But firstly and foremost, we should say that we see privacy as an opportunity. It's one for customers and companies to come closer together after you build trust with them. If you do this right and you build trust, they will give you more data and you will be able to compete in a data-driven market. Okay? Secondary to this, we understand that to meet compliance and regulations, it's difficult and it comes at a cost. It comes at an expense and hours spent as well. So we have a programmatic approach to this to automate those processes that helps to collapse costs associated to your privacy management today. Okay, so you've heard a little bit about us. I had to do that because we paid a lot of money to be here. But now we're going to talk about data stewardship. Okay, we're going to unpack that, explain exactly what that is, and we're going to talk about the blockers that are preventing companies from doing it today. Then we'll walk you through a practical framework to achieve it, the building blocks, the stepping stones that you need to go through to get there as a brand and a business. And then at the back end of the session, we've got a call to action which you're going to get some value from as well. Okay, so what is data stewardship and what's driving the need for it? So data stewardship is an integrated approach to privacy and data management to ensure the quality, integrity, accessibility and security of your data. But what does that really mean? I think a good way to think about this is to think about your own privacy policy. And I've read a lot of these in the last few months. I may have even read some of yours. And just think about the wording that you're using, the vision that you're saying to your consumers. Can you really say that you can live that value, the vision that you're explaining? It's a very difficult thing to do. Now, to be a data steward, to get this data stewardship, it all starts here. You need to have data privacy ethics as a core value, and that needs to align across your whole organization. It's everybody's responsibility. Data is a product. Okay, think about its life cycle from acquiring the data, using it to gain value, all the way up to deletion as well. And privacy needs to be baked into your operations. It can't be retrospectively fitted. That will slow you down. It needs to be agile and ready to use when the business demands upon it. Trust and privacy, they shouldn't be thought of as a compliant checkbox. That happens all too often. If you do this right, it can be a competitive advantage for you and your business. So let's talk about why aren't all businesses in that data stewardship phase today? Why not? I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, okay, and we appreciate that. You could be hamstrung by jurisdiction and policy changes. You could have sprawling data systems. It could make it very hard for you to find the data that you need to find. And you may have internal silos across your teams as well. It's not easy to be able to get to who you need to and ask them for the data that you need in order to meet consumer expectations, which, by the way, are ever growing. Okay, think about yourself in this position when you reach out to a brand and you give them a signal you expect it to be adhered to. And they're putting their money and their wallets where their actions are. They're saying, if you don't treat me right, you don't show me that you're going to be responsible with my data, I'll shop elsewhere. And think about this from a slightly different angle. Think about this from a sustainability aspect. Think about a brand in Patagonia and how people like to shop with them because their message about sustainability resonates. The same is happening in privacy now. If you're not giving that message, people will go elsewhere. There's a reason Apple are spending so much on this privacy message they're advertising everywhere right now. Now, how do we know this? How do we know that consumers will go elsewhere? We ran a survey, and the survey tells us that people value their privacy data higher than other ethical issues like sustainability and like diversity and inclusion. And again, think of your own brand. Think about the efforts they've put in to make sure They're ready. They're where they need to be with their message around sustainability and diversity, both internally for their employees, but also for their consumers as well. And then ask yourself, are we doing the same with privacy? A lot of the time the answer is no. But there's so much value to be had. And consumers see it. They want you to have their data. They see the value in you having their data. They like to be personalized to. We all do. Whether it be in store or online, makes our journey with that product or that brand quicker. And at the same time, we feel like we're known. Everybody likes being known, right? But these consumers, they're concerned. They're concerned about what you're doing with their data. You know, why are you asking me for my date of birth? Things like that. They're worried what you're going to do with it, and they're worried about how you house it and who has access to that data as well. Now, if you do this right, if you show those consumers that they can trust you to house their data and only have the data you need for only the time frame you need it for, you will be compensated. They will not only give you more data, which is going to really help you as a business, but they will spend more with you. Their purchase intent grows by 28% on average. It's a huge number and one worth thinking about. Stefan.
Thanks, Karl. So now let's take a look at the framework to future-proof your privacy program. We believe data stewardship begins with people. It's a team sport. And the key players on the pitch are legal, tech, and ultimately marketing and data teams who are responsible for driving business growth with data. So that's the first building block. The second building block is technology. To what degree are you integrating your systems, processes, both internal and external, into your privacy operation? Thirdly, data. Are you truly managing data as a product through its life cycle? And finally, from a risk management perspective, are you really embedding proactive risk intelligence into your privacy processes? So these are the key building blocks, and they come together and they're guided by our capability maturity model. And this begins with programs, progresses through programmatic privacy, where we're exploiting the benefits of automation, and ultimately towards data stewardship. In programs, this is primarily managed in a legal and compliance team. It's somewhat inefficient and reliant on many manually driven processes, like manual data discovery surveys, spreadsheet-based record of processing activities. It's highly inefficient. You really don't want to spend too much time in this phase. And at the heart of programs, we're primarily concerned with consent capture. Okay, so just hold that thought. Secondly, as we move into programmatic privacy, we're making that transition from consent capture into consent orchestration. So this is where we're integrating our internal, external systems into these consent management processes. We're fully honoring the consumer choices across all of those systems. Imagine when you first visit a website, data is being collected by many, many different MarTech platforms. So programmatic privacy is enabling the control of that data across the entire ecosystem, whether it's outside your enterprise. Here, we're also beginning to exploit automated, always-on data discovery. And what does that enable us to do? It gets rid of those manual surveys, improves efficiencies massively, but always means you've got a continuous view of where your PII data is in your internal systems. So why is that important? Well, it assists in your record of processing activities and legal obligations, but it also enables you to now automate data subject rights requests. These are typically manually driven in the programs phase, but now we're beginning to automate access rights, delete requests, anonymization policies as part of these requests across all of your systems. The benefits here can often reach an 80% cost reduction in compliance process management. So let's drill a little bit further into that concept of orchestration and automation. The key to unlocking it is identity. When you visit a website, you each have identities across many of MarTech and AdTech platforms. Let's look at a retail e-commerce online shopper, Laura. Her shopping experience may be managed by a commerce platform, where her order details, payment details are being processed. She has an identity identifying her in that platform. Her personalization and advertising experience may be being managed by a CDP and a host of other tools. The purpose of that, she'll have an ID in that system. Ultimately, her lifetime value may be being modeled, her journeys may be being analyzed on an AI platform like Databricks, another ID. Managing this identity graph of Laura means we can start to answer questions like, how are we going to enforce her consent wishes across all these platforms? How are we going to understand where her PII data is? How are we going to orchestrate data subject right requests? And how are we going to onboard a new vendor platform into these processes? So identity is key to unlocking that. And that's something our platform can manage on your behalf. Now, where do these capabilities typically fit? You know, a referenced generic engagement architecture for consumers. Multiple layers from the front-end experiences, front and middle office, CRM applications, service apps, all the way through to data systems at the back end. The capabilities of a programmatic privacy platform sit very nicely right alongside that. From a jurisdiction-aware policy management process where we define all the rules for all the different regulations across jurisdictions globally, to delivering consent experiences into the front end, to orchestrating those experiences across every layer, to doing data discovery that's always on in your back-end systems, to fulfilling data subject rights requests, to controlling and recording the activities on all of these platforms, and potentially embedding these capabilities through APIs into anything. So this really can be controlled across quite sophisticated platforms like we see here. Now, with that cracked, we're now in a great place to finally start dipping our toes into data stewardship. This is where we start to apply data access policies to these data systems. Marketing doesn't necessarily need very deep levels of access to financial transaction data, for example. So let's put a policy in place for analysts with the role of marketing to maybe just see pseudonymized views of that data. Okay? Are we looking at access and utilization intelligence here? Are there users within the organization who have very wide access rights to data sets they're never using? That's a huge risk that needs mitigating. So with access and intelligence statistics, we can identify users whose rights could need a little bit of massaging. Are you automating data retention policies? One of the key tenets of data stewardship is to maintain data for a period that is known by your users, and once that period expires, you're deleting the data. I really recently did a data subject access request, being a bit of a privacy geek, on a publisher website. And there I saw they had my browsing data from 2012 still being stored on their platform, and I had unsubscribed from their service 2 years ago. They had my bank details, my mobile number, my email address, so I promptly requested them to delete it. I was no longer an active user of their service. So this is happening to all of us everywhere. So data stewards would have deleted my data upon expiry of my agreement with them. So getting this right leads to a 28% increase in purchase intent, according to our recent survey that Karl referenced earlier. So brands we're working with are very much ready, in our experience, to transition from programs into programmatic privacy on this path. They're looking to automate these processes as the next step. So ask yourselves the question, how would you benchmark your current situation in your organization? So Karl's going to take us through how to do that.
Thanks, Stefan. Excellent. So this capability maturity model that we're discussing and talking about, the way that we work this is we assess the capabilities that you have in place today, and we benchmark it across those pillars that Stefan walked us through. So people, the team that you have in place and how they interact with each other, the technologies, data, and risk framework. Assess it along and we can point score you. So if you're in a position where everything is manual today, you'll be in programs, and that's a 1 point. Into level 2 is programmatic for 2 points. And data stewardship, when everything's autonomous, you're into level 3 here, okay? So that's how it works. And we put this in the hands of our customers. We work with them on this, but it's for them and their teams. And we need a whole team really for this to work, so we can get a holistic view and get to the real truth of where you sit and mark yourselves. Now, to help bring this to life, we've got a customer reference that we'll talk about here in IMAX. I'm sure most of you are familiar with IMAX. They've been revolutionizing cinematic experiences for around 50 years or so now. It's a great experience. If you've never been, you've got to go to one, especially to watch a Bond film. Just my recommendation. Now, IMAX, when they came to us, they were in a good place with their people, okay? They had a vision, and that vision was not just to meet compliance and regulation standards, but to give consumers what they wanted, to meet their expectations and supersede them as well. So from the people perspective, they were in a good place. It's the main foundation, the first foundation you need to get right. But when it came to technology, data, and risk framework, they were right down in a very manual process that was taking a lot of time and costing a lot of money. Money was being left on the table here, okay? Now, the main use cases they came to us for that they really wanted to work on was that they wanted to propagate consent management into orchestration. So not just collecting consent, but orchestrate this back into our own internal systems and downstream to the likes of Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and other channels. Sounds easy, right? Not so easy. Not so easy unless you have a technology in place to do this. Now that they have that, they're able to do this in an automated way. Now, another use case that they came to us for was they started to get a lot more DSAR requests, data subject right requests, and this was taking a lot of time. So how could they speed up that process and make it somewhat automated as well? Okay, now their score at this point, this was 12 months ago from now, was a 1.25. Okay, now fast forward 12 months on, and we're in a position where they are starting to move forwards. They are on that journey to data stewardship. They're now scoring a 1.75. So let's dive into that. I mentioned earlier on that when it came to automating consent orchestration into internal systems and downstream, they weren't able to do it. Now they are. This has made a massive difference to them as a business. I'll talk about the value to this in just a moment. And DSAR fulfillment, Stefan mentioned it just a moment ago. To be able to automate that process, they still have a few manual touch points in there along the way because they want them, has saved them a lot of time, effort, and money. Risk framework, they're still at the moment in a very manual process here. And a lot of that is due to their policies and procedures. But now that that team is freed up and they have some time, they're strategizing. And this is an area they're going to try to move forwards as well in the near future. So they're scoring 1.75. What does that really mean, though? They're moving forwards, which everyone's happy about, but what does it really mean? Well, the value behind this is when it comes to DSAR fulfillment, they are saving 91% of the budget they were spending on DSAR fulfillment. And when it comes to automating that consent capture into orchestration, into all of your systems, propagating it internally and externally, there was an 80% reduction in spend there as well. Okay? They've seen an 8x ROI in year one, and of course we've got that purchase intent that we know about 28% as well, which is increasing for them also. They're in a good position. Now, this maturity index model is something that we would like to make available to you to help you with assessments with your businesses. If it's something that you're interested in, we'd like you to take your phone out, scan the QR code here, and you will get a one-to-one assessment with us. We need you to bring your team so we can get that holistic view, and hopefully at the end of it we can give you some realistic steps forward to get you moving towards data stewardship. You'll be pleased to know, that's the end of my voice now, okay? We've reached the end of the session. I want to thank you very, very much for your time at the back end of day 2. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.